Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of The Kevin Moore Show. Now, on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Jeremy Finley. Now, Jeremy's investigative reporting has resulted in criminal convictions, hearings before the US Congress, the payout of more than $1 million to scam victims, and the discovery of missing girls. Now, he's the winner of more than 16 Emmys, and he's also the recipient of a National Headliner Award, and is a two-time winner of the IRE Award, recognizing the best in investigative journalism. Now, in 2016, he was named the Journalist of the Year by the Tennessee Associated Press. He is the chief investigative reporter at the NBC affiliate in Nashville, Tennessee, and he joins me today to discuss his latest book, The Dark Above, and its prequel, The Darkest Time of Night. Jeremy Finley, welcome to the show.
Oh, Kevin, it's great to be here. I greatly appreciate you asking me on.
It's a pleasure and an honor to have you on, because I know that obviously with the work that you do as well, they're kind of long days. You were just saying off air there that you sort of, up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock some mornings, and of course,
Yep.
Finishing at what, 10 o'clock maybe some days?
Some days. Tonight could have been even later, but I'm happy to be here, happy to talk about the books and anything else you want to talk about. I just appreciate you having me.
Oh, no, it's great to have you on now. And just before we start as well, obviously, you are a chief investigative reporter for WSMV-TV in Nashville. Just tell us a bit about what that job entails and how long you've been doing that for as well.
Sure. So I have been the chief investigative reporter here for about more than a decade. And our job is what you would expect investigative reporters to do. We hold the truth to power. We try to bust the bad guys. We spend a whole lot of our time doing some pretty intense research on everything from government corruption to criminal activities. And so it kind of runs the gambit. I don't have one certain focus of my investigative reporting. I do everything from, corruption at the Capitol to, the mistreatment of people in all kinds of ways. So I look at us mostly as a watchdog of government and kind of somebody to give a voice to the voiceless when we can.
Absolutely. I mean, that's fantastic work. It really is of, being of service as well, and a service to the public. And, I guess you dealt with a lot of missing cases as well, of people going missing.
We have, and it's been one of the hardest parts of our job, especially when it's a child. That's something that, you just don't ever quite get over when you see a family, even when you're being as a reporter and having to be unbiased. You watch the pain that they go through and the suffering that they go through and the bravery that they go through. And to me, that really resonated just about how much strength these families have, that they never truly give up. Their hearts kind of break, but they never give up. And that was a big part of what I do as a reporter. It impacted me as a reporter. And of course, it also impacted me as a novelist as well.
And as obviously a father of two daughters, I believe, as well.
That's right, and I think that's one of the things that really resonates is when you do have a family of your own, and it seems to, at least from my experience, writers tend to write about their greatest fears for some degree and for some reason, and certainly in my case, the idea of your child not knowing where your child is. Even talking about it right now, kind of, I can feel my chest constricting a little bit talking about it. So definitely it's a fear that I share and got into in this book for obvious reasons.
And I'm just going to say something a bit sort of off key here as well. As an outsider, I mean, obviously I'm living in America right now, but as an outsider, and going into even places like Walmart,
Right.
and you see the missing people's sort of board up in all the Walmarts as well. And that hit home to me the other day, thinking about having you on, and of course the contents of the book that we're going to get into as well, and why we're talking about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is, there is a lot of missing people out there.
There are.
So,
I think I'm glad you brought that up, Kevin, because it is, we see it so often that I think it becomes kind of commonplace. And it's just something we can't ever truly sit there and just get used to, right? It can't become commonplace. And so I think it's important to remember every time that you see the pictures of someone who's missing, especially a child, that there's a family that's deeply impacted. It's just important to remember.
Absolutely. So, I mean, with your background in journalism, so many different cases that you've covered, and of course you started at 17, wanting to get into journalism.
Right.
I guess, where did the sort of spare time and even the thought of writing, come into all this as well, writing these novels?
Well, ever since I was in the fifth grade, I was one of those kids that knew what he wanted to do. I just knew that I'd love to read. I love to make up stories. I've been doing it my whole life. But I come from a pretty blue collar background, and you didn't just go to your university to study. You went to learn a trade, and I knew that I wanted to be a writer, and I enjoyed writing for my college newspaper, and so it just kind of made sense that hey, I could make a living and also be a writer. So my dreams of becoming a novelist kind of took a back seat because I truly fell in love with journalism and especially investigative journalism. But it was about my mid 30s that I started to really get serious books that are going to be really bad, and they were really bad. And it was a struggle to finally get to the point of being published. But it was always the dream, it was always the ambition. And I tell people, listen, if you got that one ambition, and it didn't happen for you in your 20s and it didn't happen for you in your 30s, maybe it's going to happen for you in your 40s, because that's what happened to me. And all it takes is, you got to study, you learn how greats do it. You got to handle a lot of backlash and rejection. But if I can do it, you can do it. And I'm happy to be here today to be able to tell that story.
No, it's great, and I've seen some of the videos as well online on YouTube as well, where you're doing your book signings and everything else, and it's great to have seen the sort of response. And in general, what has been the response of both books, The Darkest Time of Night and The Dark Above, so far?
It's really been. It sounds a little hokey when I say that it's the highlight of my professional career, just to be able to go to book clubs and get emails from readers, and somebody like yourself that originates from the UK. I'll get email. I got an email from Czechoslovakia the other day. The book's about to be published there, and Canada and Australia, and to be able to have that kind of reach and people read your work in all these different countries and all these different places truly is nothing gets better than that. And I've been extremely fortunate that some very kind reviewers from some big publications, from the New York Post to People Magazine to NPR, they've all given it really great reviews, and I'm deeply appreciative of that. But it's truly getting the emails from readers just saying, hey, I was having a really rough day, and I started reading your book, and it just kind of took me away from that, and I really enjoyed it. And so as a writer, that's as good as it gets.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And just to think as well that you're in sort of conventional TV, and yet, to push this book, you're finding more resources online, to interact and sort of, meet different people and get on different talk shows, and how in your career as well, you've seen that shift as well from that conventional media, which the news will always be a part of, right? But to what we're doing right now.
That's right. And it's interesting that you say that, Kevin, because today I've been doing an investigation into, unfortunately, the drowning of this boy at a state park here in Tennessee. And I had to do an interview with a state lawmaker where I had to ask a bunch of questions. But once I got my information, I immediately got onto Facebook Live. And I started reporting through Facebook Live to tell everyone what was going on. And, within, 2 hours, there's 4,000 views of people that got their news from Facebook. And so, this is the future. What you and I are doing right here is the future, and people will see this on YouTube, maybe as much as they would if we were doing an interview on television or whatever. So
yeah,
it's a brave, kind of scary new world, but this is where we're at.
It is. No, just obviously I don't get to meet many sort of hosts and anchors and people that are doing the job that you're doing. So it's always nice to meet a fresh face.
Sure.
And just to see it from a different perspective as well. Most definitely. So okay, We're going to start first with the darkest time of night. We're just going to put the book on the screen, and also just before we begin as well, your website
is jeremyfinley.com. That's standard spelling of Jeremy, Jeremy, then Finley.com. You can find me easily there.
Okay, well, that's coming up on the lower third just for those watching this, and of course, for the podcast, they can go obviously to that website, and there's a link in the description below for this video as well, to the book as well. So how would you summarize The Darkest Time of Night then?
So The Darkest Time of Night tells the story of a grandson, the youngest grandson of a pretty powerful U.S. senator in Tennessee. And the boy suddenly goes missing in the middle of the night in the woods behind the senator's house. It comes out pretty quickly that he is a candidate, a top-tier candidate for vice president. And so when he disappears, as you would anticipate, the FBI, the National Guard, the local police, everyone starts looking for him, but no one is able to find any trace of him. But it really strikes home for the boy's grandmother, the wife of this politician, because when she was in her early 20s, in the late 1960s, she did research of missing people in a pretty controversial way and methods. And what she begins to realize is the disappearance of her grandson begins to match up with the research she did when she was in her 20s. And she begins to realize, of all the people looking for him, she may be the only one that can put the pieces together to try and find him. And so it is both, I describe it as a family drama mixed in with Stranger Things and X-Files. And you're always thrilled when there's comparisons made between those two fantastic shows. And so when you do get those kind of comparisons, it's greatly appreciated. But I really wanted to tell a very realistic story. I wanted to make it feel like that this was a real family that was going through this, and what they would do and what this woman would do, how far she would go, how much would she risk to expose her own past in order to find her grandson, and what would the political ramifications be for her husband if all this came out. What if she had her own secrets that would all come out if she came forward with what she knows? And so that's truly what the book explores, what she does to try and find her grandson, how far certain forces will go to try and stop her, and what ultimately is the truth about why he disappeared.
Right, okay. And the woman that you're referring to, her name is?
Her name is Lynn Roseworth. That is the name of her
Lynn, that's right.
The wife of the U.S. Senator.
Okay, and again, Lynn had an experience back when she was younger in woods that were based in Nashville, because this book is sort of based around Nashville to begin with, where you're based
That's right.
from.
And
yeah,
what Lynn also struggles with is that she has vague memories of when she was a child, and her father warns her not to go into the woods, and he was adamant that she not do this, but she can't exactly remember why. And so this is something that has haunted her. She has one memory, and that has kind of stuck with her. But she remembers this. She remembers to be afraid to go into the woods, but she can't quite remember why. So this all becomes quite circular in her life and the search for her grandson.
Okay, so now some people have reviewed these two books online, and some have done video reviews as well. And genuinely, you know, they all love both books. You know, some have said that they would never normally read this kind of book, but when they've got it in their hands to review, it's a fantastic read. And before we get into some of the other stories, let's just sort of then tie that into the next book as well, which is The Dark Above, which you can see just behind you as well with that fantastic book cover.
I know, isn't that great? I love the cover of the book for a million different reasons, but this is out in shelves right now, everywhere that you can find books. But what I wanted to do was the events in The Darkest Time of Night obviously get pretty intense towards the end, and it kind of leaves you wondering at the end what happens next. And what I wanted to do was revisit 15 years later. What happens 15 years after this family goes through this saga to try and find this boy. How does this family survive something like this? How do they pick up the pieces? Do they stay together? Do they crumble? And then what happens when they face a threat that's even bigger than what they faced in the darkest time of night? That's what sets up The Dark Above, because I wanted to take it one step further. I wanted to heighten the tension. I wanted to heighten the kind of adventure aspect of this book, and really put these characters to the limit of what they can withstand. Because at this point, it's not just Lynn that has endured this, her entire family has, and they each have a role to play when all of this begins to come full circle, and what was hinted at in the first book begins to unfold all across the world in the second. So it really shows just what this family has to endure when they have to take a cross-country epic journey to try to finally understand what's happening to all these missing people.
Absolutely. So there's many missing people here, and again, I think the first book starts off in the 1950s. Is that right?
Late 1960s as well.
1960s, sorry.
Right, but
yeah.
Actually, you're actually absolutely right, Kevin, because the book starts with Lynn remembering when she was a little girl. That would have been.
That's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You know better than I do.
Well, no, I had seen parts of. I can't say I've read all the books, but I've read parts of them. I got the gist of the story, and I thought actually this is a fascinating novel, which I don't do many interviews on this. It's mainly researchers that have actually been in the field as well. But here's an interesting thing for yourself, and of course, again, these books are based on abductions. It gets into the whole UFO Men in Black phenomena and much more, right? But where did your interest for that come in a sense?
So I've always been fascinated by the paranormal, and it's kind of a contradictory for somebody that tells the truth for a living, right? Uh, I always talk about this when I was on Coast to Coast, which is the great overnight radio show that so many of us have listened to. And we've talked about how we can be skeptics and truth seekers, but also really be fascinated by what can't be proved or is difficult to prove. So I say that I've always had this real fascination with the paranormal. But it was when my mother-in-law, who's this fantastic woman that raised 5 children, had a successful business, but really led a very quiet life. She told me once that while my father-in-law was in law school and she was working to support them, that she worked as a secretary in an astronomy department at a university. And one of the professors that she worked for was a UFO researcher. And she talked about how she would take these messages from all over the world, from people that were afraid, and they were alarmed by what they had experienced or what they had seen, and they wanted to talk to this professor. So that really gave me the idea of, wow, that is a immersion of worlds here, of this woman that's led this really kind of quiet life and just kind of slammed together with the paranormal. And I basically took that idea and fictionalized it for this story. But that's what really fascinates me. And of all stories of the paranormal, these are regular people, just like you and me, that are going about their daily lives, and then something extraordinary happens. And how do they go on? How do they make sense of what they've experienced? And so that not only is the heart of the books, but also what gave me the idea to write.
Fascinating. So when she told you that, what did you initially think?
Well, it was, I'll never forget that moment where she told, because we were in the kitchen doing dishes of all things at her home. And I literally was so stunned. I stopped and just kind of looked at her, and I was like, how is it you've never told me this? I've been married to your daughter for like 15 years at this point. And, she just, that's who she is. She's unassuming. And, she's like, it was just a very weird part of my life. It wasn't very long. It was not a very long period. But I wanted to make a cognizant effort not to ask her too much about it, because I knew I wanted to fictionalize it, and I didn't want anyone to think, okay, this is what happened to Finley's mother-in-law, because it's not. It's just what gave me the idea, and I fictionalized the rest. But I'll tell you what has just been one of the most remarkable parts of this is she knew that I didn't ask any questions about this. But about 6, 7 months ago, she came to me and she said, "So you want to know who the professor is that I worked for?" And I was like, "Yeah, you never said." And it was J. Allen Hynek, who is one of the world's foremost experts on UFOs. And so that was fascinating. I mean, the man that coined the phrase and the terminology for close encounters, that's who my mother in law worked for. And it's just fascinating to see all this kind of come full circle and to find this out. And then, of course, having done so much research into Hynek's work and then what the other researchers that did their work in the 1960s, as research wise, to know he was the guy was a pretty great discovery.
Oh yeah, I mean, didn't he have a research center in Chicago in the end? Was that his final kind of resting place?
So he worked at Northwestern University,
Yeah.
which is where my mother-in-law worked for him as a
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was that was one of the places, and that's where she met him. That's where she worked for him.
Wow. Now, I wonder what happened to all of his great research, because that was a center that was open to the public, I believe, at the time as well. And I wonder who's become the sort of, where that archive material ended up, in someone's garage, in someone's basement right now, because there was a hell of a lot of stuff, I would have imagined.
There's a great book that's on my nightstand of things to read, and it's all about his life. It's a new book that's come out, and I wish I could remember the name of it because a really respected a writer has written it. It's obviously a biography about him, and it contains all those kind of answers. But the History Channel just came out with a fictionalized documentary of his experience called Project Blue Book. He's really once again entered the mainstream of with this new book out about his life, and then the series on the History Channel. And so I'm hoping that whoever has his original findings and discoveries are protecting them. But I feel good the fact that there's already documentation of everything that he's discovered. And the great thing about him is that he was a skeptic hired by the government to disprove UFOs, and then ended up being an expert who believed. So
I mean,
it was really fascinating.
You just can't make it up.
Right.
No, I bet there is a custodian out there somewhere in Chicago that actually has that stuff. I'm sure there is. I do know of people that actually went to that center within the early 2000s, and they brought away with them some amazing, reportings and stuff. So when doing the research for this, what sort of abduction cases did you actually get to look at, in a sense?
So I took a pretty deep dive when I was doing this because I wanted it to be as authentic as much as I could to what those researchers did in that time frame. Because you have to realize there obviously was no internet. Phone was fine, but it wasn't what we have today. There was no immediate sharing of pictures or documents. So I wanted to incorporate the struggles that they went through and how they shared this. And so I went back to their research. I went back to MUFON and all of these organizations that truly existed in that time period and what they did to try to do their research. And I researched all kinds of cases, read about some of the most famous cases, and then some of the kind of obscure cases, and kind of just did everything that I could, but try to keep it in that time frame because I thought the limitations really made for a great story of how they really tried to find out what they could in a world that was even more skeptical than we are today of that kind of work. So it was really focused pretty much on the time that those abductions occurred.
I mean, was some of the abduction cases that you read, were they just were they so out there in some respects to what you'd come across before, and so obviously in some of the cases that you've looked into, I mean, they must have been pretty strange.
Yeah, I read a lot. I read a lot of cases, and I really tried to stick to the ones, with my research at least, that had interviews or some kind of verification that, as journalists, we seek out experts, right? It's what we do in order to tell our stories. And so I kind of went that same route. I went to the experts, looked at the cases that they had investigated, and leaned more on that than I did just, reports and that people would talk about online or something like that. Not to discount people's reports, because I've had a lot of people reach out to me, even friends of family that I've never met before, saying this happened to me. And so, I'm always fascinated to hear people's stories. But since I always want my books to be rooted in reality, even if they become speculative in nature. It was important for me that I really look at the cases that were documented in research for me to then take and make into a story.
Absolutely. And did you sort of branch out to any sort of modern day researchers? I mean, of course, the book's based in, in the Hynek sort of time period in a
Sure.
sense. But did you sort of in that research sort of embrace any sort of newer kind of researchers in the field right now and study them?
I did. One of the books, if you haven't read The 37th Parallel, it's another nonfiction book that came out that was just so well done, and it really opened my eyes to a whole new kind of caveat, a new um, measure of thought of what could be happening with these abductions and these sightings. And so I took a lot from that book of nonfiction and looked at the cases that they looked at, the author looked at in that aspect. So yeah, I mean but it's in our day and age. I mean, you turn on the news and there's something new about a pilot that saw something in the sky, and it's very much in our mainstream thought of what's going on with these unexpected sightings, with more government officials coming forward saying that they saw something, and so it's so available now that the research is relatively easy to find modern day accounts and what people say happened.
What do you think it is about a book like that you've done here with, the Dark Above, where, it captures people's attention? The whole UFO subject does as well, the abduction subjects. What do you think that is in our
Yeah,
psyche?
Kevin, a lot of people have asked this, like, okay, what is it that just we just become a public, because like you said, I've had a lot of readers come to me and say, look, I typically don't read science fiction, but I really dig this, I really love this. And I think to a degree it's kind of the pop culture world that we're living in right now. Stranger Things is huge, so a lot of people are enjoying that. To a much different fantastical aspect, Game of Thrones is the biggest television show in the world, right? So we the mindset of the Avengers are huge. So I think that in Comic Con, you think about the big things. So all of that has kind of become mainstream. What used to be like super nerdy and geeky, like when I was a kid, and is now mainstream. And so I think that there's more of a collective thought about that, a little more discussion about that. So I think is a from a pop culture standpoint, that's why books, hopefully like mine that I've written, are resonating with people, that they enjoy it. But in terms of why people are, if they're more interested now in UFOs than they were in the past, I honestly think that it has just been, it's the greatest mystery of our time. Are we alone in the universe? And it's something everybody can identify with. When I came up with the title for the second book, The Dark Above, I really wanted to encapsulate that feeling of when you go out into the countryside and you look up in the night sky and you're away from a city, and it's just vast and you almost get overwhelmed by what you're seeing above you. And to a degree, especially when we were children, it was a little frightening just to think about that. And I think that just resonates with us as a species. Are we it? Are we the only ones here in this vastness of space? And so I think that just strikes to people on all kinds of different levels.
Well, what's it do for you when you've asked those deeper questions, like, are we alone? If we're not, what does that mean about the nature of our reality, in a sense, or the essence of those bigger questions, like whatever that may lead down, because it can lead down a lot. But what's it do for you to sort of dive deeper into that? Is it almost like it's a sort of dive into the sort of spiritual side as well?
Sure. Oh, it absolutely is. So I'm a devout Catholic, and I feel I have a very strong belief, a very strong faith. I should say a devout Catholic. I'm a very devout in my beliefs, but probably a little not as intense as some of my other Catholics, but on some different levels. But I say that in the sense that if we think about what would happen if proof of alien life came to us, what would that do for us? It would change everything. Everything. It would change our religion, how we, I mean, to some degree, it would change about our religion. It would impact our schools, our government. It would, everything would change. So I do think about that. And that's one of the things that people have asked me as a man of faith. What do you do when you're exploring something that might, shatter the concept of religion? So that's probably a book for a different time, but it is for me something that I very much struggle with. First off, as a reporter who always wants to see the truth, right? I want to see the proof in order to tell a story. I want to see it. I want documentation of it, and I want to be able to deliver that. But this is different. This is completely sometimes just a shred of evidence. And so when you look at these people that have devoted their entire lives to this kind of research, you really have to give them incredible props, because it's so difficult. There's so much scrutiny you face. But I think that's the thing that I keep coming back to, Kevin, is that these people that are coming forward with these stories about abductions or sightings or whatever you'll have, they have nothing to gain from this. There's going to be some people that may try to make something out of it. For the most part, these people have nothing to gain. They have nothing to, nothing help. This does not help them. It scrutinizes them. It makes them, seem strange to other people that they believe this. But still, they talk about this. And so when people say, "Hey, Finley, do you believe in UFOs?" What I say is, I believe the people. I believe these people that are telling these stories. I don't have the answers, but I believe them because they have nothing to gain. And how can one person on one part of the world describe something that another person on another part of the world, a similar experience that they've never met and they've never seen each other? So there's got to be something there. I don't know if it's something of a human conscious, if it's something in our brain, or if it's something otherworldly, but I believe the people telling these stories.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We don't know what it is, do we? And it could be something so far out of our understanding of the nature of reality that it's on a different level to anything we even comprehended it being. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
is it something that we simply just cannot understand, or is it a something part of the human mind or experience that we don't understand? And I think that's what is just so fascinating to this day.
Well, that's what your book allows, readers who have not kind of entered this material before to sort of, come from a, I'll call it. Am I okay to call it a science fiction book as well?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
thriller.
Thriller. Yeah.
Describe it as a science fiction thriller. But I'm glad you put it that way, Kevin, because I wanted it to almost come from a familiar space, right? I mean, it starts off, the books have a very political theme to them. And that was something that I think that a lot of people can identify with. And so I wanted it to come from that place that then kind of moves into the more speculative nature.
Yeah, and I think that opens up doors for people who would not normally read that kind of stuff, like I said before. But I know some people watching this right now is like, well, you've not given much away, but I don't want to actually with this interview. I want to say that there's there's enough good material in there for people to it's like a teaser, isn't it? We watch a lot of. I know you probably watch a lot of movies which have helped you inspire your writing.
Sure.
But sometimes when the teaser gives way too much away, we're like, well, I've seen the movie now. Do you know what I mean?
That's right. I think of that too when I watch movie trailers. I'm like, don't need the movie now. This. But yeah, I mean, I kind of describe them as the very traditional thrillers that then are combined with pretty epic adventures. And that I love to read. And we kind of live in difficult times, right? We live in very tense and very ugly times. And so I think to some degree we're looking for healthy escapes. And I know in my life I've enjoyed all kinds of literature that has helped me understand new things, or just simply escape in a good way. And that's what I hope I'm writing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And obviously having written these two fantastic books, I mean, I know in you there's probably a sort of there's something there that there's another book. There is another book, right? But do you think it would be in this realm in a sense, or are you looking to explore other things?
So I will tell you that I always think I'll always write thrillers, right? That's what I love to write. It's what I love to read. I love to read everything, but thrillers are really what I enjoy writing the most. So I always think that my thrillers will have a bit of a speculative bent to it, because I love that notion of taking something so familiar and then exposing your characters to something that they can't begin to understand. So I think that the book that I'm working on now, um, definitely has that element to it, and because just for me, that's what I enjoy writing. I love seeing movies like that. I love seeing thrillers like that. I'm a huge fan of horror. I'm a huge fan of science fiction, but thrillers are truly what gets me through the difficult times in my life when I need to escape. So that's pretty much what I'm aiming for.
That's great. They're great. Absolutely. And obviously, having come across the UFO field, I mean, did you know that the UFO fields kind of existed there before you sort of done your research, or?
So I was very much a novice when it came to UFOs. I mean, and obviously pop culture and movies and books and things like that. My number one favorite book of all time is Contact by Carl Sagan. That's my book. That's so to me, that is the book that like really got me thinking. Okay, what would happen if we had our first communication with um, with a life form beyond us, and what would the implications be on humankind? So to me, that was my first real exposure to it. But once I started jumping down the rabbit hole and doing my research, I've just been fascinated about it ever since.
Well, yeah, I mean, for first-time people coming into the UFO field, one, it's a lot bigger than it ever used to be, right?
Sure.
Especially with the online market, and with the sheer amount of online podcasts nowadays
Right.
covering subjects, and of course video shows as well. But there is a whole mix of people out there in this field, and obviously, and with you as an investigative journalist, I'm sure you would find some very interesting, bizarre people in this field. Let me
Yeah,
just say that.
it's there's room for everybody. There's room for everybody, but I do get my share of emails from people asking me to investigate some pretty bizarre stuff, and so I just have to politely appreciate them reaching out. And but you do. I still to this day, I want the proof. I want to hear, and I want to see it for myself. I want to be able to talk to the person that witnessed it. So you know, to me, I'm still searching. I'm still looking for the proof. And so, when I talk to people that truly, have something to say or have something to show, then I'm all ears. I'm ready to hear it.
Yeah, there are some good people in this field. One person that I got to interview not too long ago in person in Arizona, in Snowflake, was Travis Walton,
Mm,
and
mm.
Fire in the Sky guy.
Oh yeah,
Very interesting guy.
sure.
I mean, I know he's, some people have debunked him, but I found him to be very sincere when sat with him. Do you know what I mean? And I really like the guy. And the whole town where he's from is, there's memorabilia bloody everywhere
Oh,
because of
absolutely.
the people that go there.
Right.
It was incredible to see. It really was.
Well,
Yeah.
talk about someone that just faced incredible scrutiny into this day. Really, heart wrenching kind of scrutiny. That's an example, I think, of somebody that, they came from a very working class background, and then to come forward with what they say happened to them is pretty remarkable.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that
Yes.
fits the bill.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, how is your wife taking what you're doing right now as well?
She was asleep, and so my family. It's interesting. She's a former journalist who is a pretty lives solidly in the real world. She's a great supporter, a talented writer in her own aspect. But she kind of leaves me to creative juices and just says, kind of do your own thing. And, that it's probably best for our marriage that we have.
Well, and the reason I mentioned her, I could have sort of mentioned the broader family there as well, but I guess I should have mentioned, like, how has the broader family taken the newest book as well?
Yeah, it's really been great. I have a phenomenal family, both my own and my wife's family, that have just been incredibly supportive. I have an older brother who is a real asset to me in terms of bouncing off ideas. And we're from a small town in Illinois, and so it's really fun for the town to really embrace these books. And my friends from high school and college, and through various parts of my life, really support. I got a text message from my college roommate 2 days ago, and he said, I just finished the book and I loved it. And so, it's the support's been really great, because, they very well could be like, oh, your son wrote this crazy book about a thriller about, UFOs. But they've universally embraced it. And, so it's been really fantastic.
And I saw some footage of some interviews that you've done at work as well, and it's great to see that your colleagues have supported your work as well. And that was really beautiful to see that was.
It's great. I work for a television station, and great journalists that I work with, and they've had a lot of fun talking about the book being out and everything like that. So it's a great support system there too.
No, absolutely, it is, absolutely. What would you say as well, if you sort of could combine both books together, what would you say is the most important message of the two books so far?
So I think when people have asked me this question, like, what do you want people to take away from this? And truly, this is a story about family. This is a story about how far we will go for the people that we love. And it's also about, the families that we're born into, and then the families that we choose. And the darkest time of night truly is about the family that we were born into, what they will do to try and find this boy. The dark above really kind of expands a little bit more, is that, yes, it begins with this same family, but then they have to kind of find their own ways with their own tribe and their own people to try to go through this. And I think that the message is, regardless of the flaws that you have in your own family, regardless of the tension, regardless of the problems that you have, there is just something about the people that we choose, we're either born into or that we choose, that stay with us, and the importance of not giving up on those people. So to me, that's what I hope people take away from this, is that there's this bond that holds us together, and there's a reason that bond is there.
Well, I think that's just so important, isn't it? It's so true what you say as well. No family is perfect. Give me one that is. Do you know what I mean? And we don't always appreciate what we've got until it's taken away. And I think that's a beautiful message in the book. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. So just remind us one more time again. Your website for the podcast is
JeremyFinley.com.
Okay, and this is available from all good bookstores. I know it's available on Amazon, but I know Barnes & Nobles will stock this book as well, and all good bookstores will have this.
I always tell people, please, support your local independent bookstores. If you can go to those independent stores in your community, that's great. I love Barnes & Noble. I love Amazon. I love anybody that's going to sell the book. The audio book is out now on Audible. The ebook is out on Kindle. Like I said, it's going to be in the fall, going to be in Czechoslovakia. It's already kind of surfaced in Canada and places like that. So, hopefully the people keep enjoying it and keep spreading the word about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the passion. Thank you for what you do. Thank you as well for all the years that you've done as a journalist as well. I'm sure you've helped a lot of people that you'll never know sometimes who have come across your material, and for the work that you've done. So it's been a joy to have you on. So just Jeremy Finley, just thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, Kevin, I also want to thank you. Writers, all we want is people to read our books. We want to communicate with them, and you do a great service to us for having me on talking about the book. I greatly appreciate that, and I wish you all the best of luck as well.
Thank you.